Okay, welcome aboard Db2 stream, day 2 at GSE UK Virtual Conference. And I'm pleased to welcome Emil Kottridge from Broadcom, who's going to give us a great session on Db2 13 application development topics. And this is session 6H. If you do have any questions along the way, please put them into the chat and we'll unmute as required to get the questions answered. So without further ado, over to you, Emil, and good luck.
Yeah, hello, and thank you, Colin. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Emil Kottridge. I work for Broadcom as one of the architects in Db2 tools, and I'm based in Prague, Czech Republic. So I'm 1 hour ahead of time. So actually, it's my lunchtime. So if I go too fast, please stop me. It means that I need to take some rest and wait for the lunch. So my session will be about Db2 13 application development topics, and it will be a light walkthrough of features in Db2 that might be interested to application developers. Compared to Db2 12, there are not so many features, but I think there are some nice enhancements that I think are worth sharing, and that's what I want to do. So I will close my camera if you don't mind, just to say hello. I just opened it. I will open it at the end if there are any questions. But as Colin said, if you have any questions, please ask during the call. Colin will monitor the chat, and we can jump to questions if needed. So I will close my camera now and will continue with the session. So this is my agenda. I will start with actually the brief history. I have the slides there at the appendix, so I will not go there because that would be for many hours session. I will start then with continuous delivery, some things that we know, but let's have everyone on the same page. Then I will go through some of the smaller SQL changes in Db2 13, including the function levels. And then I will take a look at those major topics, in my opinion, and that's application level log control and profile table enhancements. I will talk a bit about SQLDI, but really in some details, which I found interesting. So hopefully that will be interesting to you as well. And then we'll go through some performance improvements and some APARs that were released outside of function levels. Also, most of the information I have here comes from the 2 red books. I have them in the links. So one is about the Db2 13 in general, and the other one is performance topics. So really, if you want to learn more, then go to those red books that were published last year, I believe, or even the year before. And they are very good sources of information. So when I was thinking about application development topics available in Db2 13, I mean, everything since Db2 1 is there. So, and if you are interested in the appendix, I have like those SQL related features tracking down to Db2 1 to Db2 12 latest function level. I will not go through that, only if you have time. So let's do a quick recap of continuous delivery, because Db2 13 is based on continuous delivery, which was introduced with Db2 12. I'm pretty sure at this time everyone is aware of these concepts: catalog level, function level, maintenance level, and what's most important for application developers, I guess, or for applications in general, is Apple Compat. So these 4 levels, we are aware of them. Display group can show you all these 3: catalog level, function level, and the maintenance level. Application compat is application specific, so it's a bind option, and there is also a special register. There are a couple of function levels released for Db2 13 already. So the GA release was shipped with the 3 function levels: 100, 500, and 501. So if you migrate from version 12, you will go through 100, then 500, which contains the new functions that do not require catalog changes. 501 is the function level that contains functions which require catalog level changes. And then there were a few more function levels released. And by the way, this table is not up to date. I just checked today morning, and 505 was released. So if you want to check later, go to IBM website and see what's new in 505. And there are some nice features as well. So I will not talk about them because I don't have them covered yet, but there are some features that might be interested to as well. So I will start with 504 with my session, and in the column SQL changes, you see if there are any SQL changes I will be talking about. So yes, I will start with 504 later with some SQL changes. Before I go there, I want to point out this Apple Compat and distributed packages. Again, I think at the time when I do this session, everyone is aware, but in the past it was not very common, and some customers are experiencing problems with distributed applications, especially early in the DB2 12 days. So I hope that you are already sorted this out, how to deal with that. Basically, the problem was with the null ID packages for distributed applications. And back then in V12, you had to do changes on the client side to update to use the proper package set and so on. So, and that has changed because IBM released a PTF for V12, and in V13 it's much easier. So this is what I have seen by customers for a long time for traditional applications. On the left hand, the DB2 for ZOS, set of null ID packages, which are usually rebound with the new release of DB2. And on the right hand, you had client applications, the driver, and connecting to DB2, maybe directly or using gateway or some other means. Now, what IBM recommends, and also they have a new sample JCL to help with that, is a different set of null ID packages for different function levels. For some applications that don't need these new features, you may want to keep those null ID packages bound with function level 500, and maybe some new applications may want to use those new features. So IBM recommends you to have a null ID packages for these new applications with this new Apple Compats. The reason is to keep the existing application stable, to not break them if there is any new change. So you don't want to have most likely you don't want to have a packages bound with the latest function level, Apple Compat value, because there might be some incompatible changes that could potentially break some or make some incompatible behavior. So that's just for your awareness. Again, I want to point out this Apple Compat because not everyone keeps an eye on the Apple Compat. So now let's go through the main part of my session and these DB213 SQL changes. So I will start and I will go back in time. So I will start with 504. And please note that the topics I discuss here, it doesn't mean that I am expert in these. I just learned as I go, played with some of them, but I'm really not an expert, and I don't know everything about these things. So for example, this one, I was not even aware that there was a restriction that if you use list egg, you couldn't use order by clause. So I was not aware of it. So I learned when this 504 was in development. So there was an aha idea to remove this restriction, because before this function level, such a SQL, which is in example here, and this is just an example taken from the documentation. So prior to 504, this would fail because of the order by. Now with 504, this will work. So if you are using list egg, this might be interest of you. So small and nice enhancement, I would say. This one, minimized impact of invalidated packages with statement level invalidation. I think this has a big potential, and that's an attempt IBM started with DB213 already. So they introduced the depth level bind option in a prior function level in DB213. So if you have that, if you have this statement level, because by default it's a package level, and that's what we know since beginning, right? You have a package, and if you run some alter or some activity that invalidates a SQL, the entire package is invalidated, right? And you need to rebind or auto bind it and so on. So now what will happen with this statement? So if you use the statement level invalidation, DB2 will keep track of invalidated statements in the package, which means that those statements that are valid may be executed immediately, and invalid statements will go through incremental bind. This feature will also use this auto bind phase in. That functionality is similar to what was introduced in 505 in V12, which means that the new connections or new threads will use the new bound packages, new bound statements, and the existing will keep using the existing. So I don't have much experience with this, but I see big potential. Apparently, this might be a tricky because most likely you don't want to have this depth level for all packages, but maybe it makes sense for some that where you see some issues for contentions, binds, DDL changes, and so on. So maybe that could be interesting to keep monitoring which packages might be candidates for this statement level dependency. So again, introduced in 504. Let's go to 503, a small change in alter table with add column of row change timestamp. So if you recall Db2 this row change timestamp was introduced in this version to support the optimistic locking. Basically, that's a technique where you have an application and you don't want to lock the data. And most of the time, there is no contention. So you can just select the data and then you run some update and that's it, without locking the data for a long time. But you need to check whether someone else also updated the data. And if there was some other application that updated the data, then you need to take another option, like maybe select again and run the update again. So, and to support that, IBM introduced this row change timestamp, which is the timestamp of the latest update of the row. So you could select this value, and then at the time when you do the update, you can check whether there was any change, whether this value has changed or not. So, and it works all good. The only problem here was that when you did this alter to add this new column, Db2 used as the default value the row's page header value, which contains the LRSM. The problem here is, so if you create a new table, no problem. So it only affects existing tables, and you do the alter, and the rows that do not have this column will use the default value based on the page header. The problem here is that this value can be inconsistent, because now you can, if there is a change in this page for a different row, for example, this value will change, even if the row itself will not change. So what they did in 503, they basically make it more predictable, and they save the default value as the time of the alter itself. So which I think is pretty cool. But again, I would say it doesn't affect many customers. It only affects you if you do this alter. For create, nothing changes. This one, I was not even aware that there was such a limit. So apparently, if you are using IDAA v7 accelerator, you can have more in-list elements than 32K. So I have an example here with just three elements in list. So this allows you to have even more. So I guess this targets customers who are using these huge in-list elements with IDAA. So another feature in 503, another small SQL enhancement, optimize clause for select into. So optimize for n rows is now allowed for select into. And the reason is to influence the access path. So I was a bit confused, because this is, we are talking about a singleton, right? So I mean, I will just return, I just want one row. But apparently you can still influence the optimizer, whether you want to avoid the sort, or you would prefer sort avoidance, or whether optimizer should consider sort when selecting the access path. And moreover, it completes the syntax. So now optimize clause is allowed even for singletons, not just for normal select. Okay, 501 changes or SQL changes. And this is what I want to cover in a separate section. So let me skip that. Just a quick note that now applications have a chance to influence the deadlock resolution priority. So, and I will be talking in a separate section about this. Another feature here, this is maybe more of interest for DBAs, because sorry. Because it's about the flexibility for packages and the ownership. But I think at least developers should be aware of it. So now there is a new owner type keyword in bind and rebind, and you can specify whether the owner is the user or role. And there is like a short example at the end. So for example, if a DBA is under trusted context binding a package, then role is as a default owner. And you can change it later, for example, if you want to change it to the user ID or role. So might be useful. Especially I spoke with some customers recently who are migrating from old user IDs, and maybe roles might be where they want to go. So this is a way how eventually you can change the ownership of packages to the roles. Now we are back at 500, which was in the initial release of V13. And again, the topic here is something that I want to cover in an extra section. So now applications have a feature to control the timeout, actually. So I will talk about it in a minute, plus profile table enhancements. And I also will cover SQL data insights very briefly in a later section. So please let me skip that. One interesting feature was introduced even in function level 100. And I remember this one because it was shared when Db2 13 was introduced at IDAC North America 2 years ago, I believe. And this looks interesting, but I would be very careful with this feature. So it now allows you to use long names in the column names from 30 to 128. But if you read the documentation carefully, you will see that SQL DA is still 30 bytes, which means you would see some truncation if you are using SQL DA and so on. So my belief is that this targets mainly some distributed applications. By default, this is off, and most likely you don't want to turn this on unless you understand the impact on your applications and also on your vendor tools. So just a warning. But maybe you are the customer who really required this feature, so maybe this is for you. Okay, so far so good. Any questions? I don't see anything in here, or maybe.
No, there's no questions just now, Emil.
Okay, cool. So I'll continue. And this is where I want to discuss this application level log control, which in my opinion is one of the major features that's available for application developers in Db2 13. So let's do some brief intro of what this is about, some problem definition, basic information. So Db2 uses logs for concurrency control. We know that, right? So I will skip this. And logs have some characteristic, like log size, is it on the page or the table space level and so on. It has a duration. It means for how long the log is being held. The mode, which can be share, update, exclusive, and those high logs like for partition, table space, and tables. And there is some compatibility, which I have on this slide. Just example for those page and row logs. So we have these three logs S, U, and X, and you can see this compatibility metric. So if I have a transaction that has a S log and I have another transaction that wants to acquire S log, the shared log, it's allowed. But if I have a transaction that wants an exclusive log, this is not allowed. Okay, so it's not compatible. So, and what can happen with this log? So I have three items here listed. So one of them is suspension. So which means that if my transaction wants to acquire an incompatible log, I need to wait, basically. Okay, so and that's suspension. Timeout means that if I'm waiting for too long, then my process is terminated, and I get this SQL code -911, for example, and my transaction ends. The other problem, the third one I have here, is a deadlock. So if I have two or more processes that hold a lock, which the other one is waiting for, then we are in a deadlock situation. And IRLM has this deadlock cycle detection, and it detects this problem and will terminate one of the transactions. So Db2 somehow selects a victim and rollbacks and terminates the process so that it resolves the deadlock. So this is the visualization of what I just said. So let's say I have this on top, the green one, it's the transaction A that holds a lock on resource X, and then transaction B at the bottom starts and wants to request an incompatible lock on the same resource. So B is suspended for some period of time. And then if it's waiting too long beyond the timeout interval, B is terminated. So this is the timeout problem. Deadlock is a bit different. So I have, again, transaction A and B. So A starts and obtains an exclusive lock on some resource, and B does the same, also obtains an X lock, but on a different resource, on a resource Y. And then transaction A wants to obtain an X lock on the resource Y, which is held by B already, and B wants to do the same, but on the X resource. So now we are in this deadlock situation. So A is waiting for B, and B is waiting for A. So DB2 will figure this out, and there is this deadlock situation. So it will detect, hey, here is the deadlock. I will select the victim and terminate. And DB2 has some logic that determines which should be the victim, but basically you have no control over that. So in this case, for example, B will be terminated and A can then continue. What are the DB2's control to timeout and deadlock time? So there are these two important parts. Resource timeout ZParm, that's the first one, the blue one, which defines the timeout interval. So, and the change here is, first change is that this is online changeable in DB213. So you can recompile your ZParms and load the new value. The other parm is deadlock, and that's the parameter of the IRLM procedure, which is the deadlock detection time. So after these periods of time, DB2 will check or IRLM will check if there is any deadlock, and default is 1 second, I believe. If you issue this command modify RLM proc status, you will see both of the values. So in my case, you see I have deadlock equal to 1000. This is in milliseconds, so it's 1 second, and the timeout is 60 in my case, so 60 seconds. The actual wait time is based on this calculation. So wait time is equals to timeout period multiplied by timeout multiplier. For us, it doesn't matter that much. So timeout period really is the rounding, so that it always goes in the deadlock time intervals. So that we always have these deadlock cycles, and the timeout multiplier actually depends on the type of the request. So in our case, because we talk about application developers, it will be the first row in the table at the bottom. So TSO, RSAF, KICS, most of the IMS have multiplier equal to 1. So in my case, the wait time will be 60. Okay, if I have timeout defined as 60, so my actual wait time will be 60 seconds as well. Now, what's the problem here? Is that now all applications are subject to the same interval, which, I mean, maybe it's not a problem because it's working fine for years. The problem might become when you have, or when you consolidate applications from different LPARs or maybe even from different platforms, and now you may experience timeouts, which you didn't experience before, because now all the applications have the same intervals or are subject to the same interval. So maybe now your applications have different requirements. Again, most likely it's not a problem until you start consolidating or you are getting new applications from other platforms. Actually, the behavior that was implemented here comes from the DB2LUW, which has this feature for some time already. So that's where this is coming from. In my diagram, what I wanted to show here again in this picture, because I'm pretty visual, so I want to show it. So I have different transactions. I have A, B, C, and D. A is very long one that holds this resource, but the suspended time, as you can see, or maybe you see it, it's the same interval for all the applications. But maybe what I want to do is that different applications may want to wait for a different time. So, for example, my C transaction, maybe it's super short one, so it doesn't have to wait for a long time. So the earlier I know, the better, so it can wait for a shorter time. The D transaction, it's a long running, so maybe it can wait a bit more longer. So maybe I can just wait a longer so that A actually releases the lock and I can continue. So the solution here is that applications now can influence this timeout interval. Is this for you? I don't know. It depends on your application. So you need to monitor. I have an example, like you need to monitor if you see many timeouts, deadlocks. Maybe this is where you can start thinking about, is this something that we may want to use? Because really, I don't want to, or if I'm a DBA, I don't want to see application developers doing all these crazy things and doing whatever they want. So especially in this case, when I tell this to DBAs, they feel, oh, now bad things will happen because every application will try to modify their timeout interval. So let's explain what's behind. So in v13.500 function level, IBM introduced this current lock timeout special register. And it's basically a number of seconds before resource timeout is detected. And it overrides that timeout value in IRLM, basically. The problem with special register is that there is no security control. You can change it in your application, right? You can see I have example here. I just select from the lock timeout. I see this 60 because the default comes from the IRLM again. But fortunately, there is some control in DB213 which helps DBA to control this behavior. So there is a ZPARM at the bottom of my slide here. You can see this ZPARM, which is the maximum allowed value that application developers can use. And if application exceeds this value, application will terminate with the SQL code, negative SQL code at the bottom. So what are the allowed values for this special register? So the default comes from the IRLM, so that's what is set by default. Then you can specify number of seconds. What's interesting is that you can also use this conditional lock. If you use the value of 0, conditional lock means that you will just know whether there is a lock or not. So that might be helpful to some applications to learn if there is any lock. And -1 means indefinitely, wait indefinitely or to a deadlock. So this is what's available. On the right hand, you see how I did it. And if you want to reset back to default, you just specify set current lock timeout now, and this will again default to the IRLM value. So far, so good. So that was the first feature, how applications can change or influence the timeout interval. The second feature, which was introduced in 5.01, is about deadlock selection. So I said that DB2 somehow, if it detects the deadlock problem, it will somehow decide who will be canceled. And it depends on many factors. You have no control over them. Or actually you do. If you commit properly, maybe you will not be selected as a victim, or I don't know, it depends. So now this was introduced in 5.01. And the reason why this was introduced in 5.01 is that there is a new global variable, and global variables are also in the catalog. So there is this new deadlock resolution priority built-in global variable, which you can use to influence if you will be selected as a deadlock. The beauty of this is that this is a global variable, which means that there is some authorization required. So you cannot update it unless you have right privileges to set the value, which means that now your applications may need this right privilege to use this. So by default, it's not granted to public. I wouldn't do it. So now you have some control how you can control which applications can use it. The higher value, the less likely a deadlock victim. So again, this really needs some care. And if you experience some deadlocks, maybe you can take a look at your applications and maybe start thinking, maybe this application is victim and it shouldn't be. So let's use this and specify a high value And for the other application, let's specify a low value so that you can influence who will be selected as a victim. One more note on a similar topic, but this was introduced in V12 507, where IBM provided some application granularity for locking limits. Maybe you are aware that there are the Z-parms. One of them is number of lock for object, and the other one is number of locks per transaction. And now these can be controlled on application level as well, which can give you more granularity. And again, depending on your applications and the consolidations, maybe some applications may have different requirements. So this is something that you can also influence since version 12. And this is based around the built-in global variables again, which means that there is some authorization required. So this is not like available to any application. They need to have this right control, right privilege. So that was a quick walkthrough of those two features I think are interesting or significant in DB213. Any questions? May I go on? Let me check.
Yeah, we've got sort of, I think one question kind of came in just before you explained that there's no actual security on the setting the timeout value, and that it's a register rather than a global variable.
Yeah,
So that kind of feels a bit, I think Diran is saying it feels a bit unsafe as it's not secured. Although obviously you can specify the limit within the ZPalm.
Yeah, but special registers are, yeah, anyone can use them, right? So there is, yeah.
So is that, yeah, I just wonder whether that's something that IBM may consider changing to be a global variable with
I don't
security
know.
control.
My understanding is that in DB2 LUW, it's also driven by the special register, and I think they wanted the compatible behavior, I would say.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe we can discuss that with IBM Open AHA idea, whatever. But I think this is what it is at the moment. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm watching time. I think I'm good on time. So the next section is about profile tables enhancements. And actually, this is related to the prior section because now in DB213, they made some changes in the profile tables. And maybe you identify that your applications are experiencing timeouts and deadlocks. And maybe you want to use those features, but you don't want to change your applications. And this is the way which can help you. So profile tables are here to help you so that you can influence those things even without modifying your applications, which I think is cool. So what has changed now in DB213 is that profile tables can be used even for local applications, not only for remote, because in the past it was only to control the remote application. So now this can be used even for local applications. And it can be used to set global variables and special registers. These two, as I spoke about in the prior section. And basically, you don't need to update your application. If you want to update this global variable or special register, you can use profile tables now even for local applications. So that it plays really well with enhancements in the prior section. So for profiles, there are two tables. So there is this DSN profile table, which identifies the application. So for identifying local applications, you have some options. You can specify auth ID, role, collection, package name, and some others. So that's where you define your application. It might be tricky actually in some cases, because if you use all the same auth ID for all your applications, then maybe it will be difficult for you. Maybe on the package level you can decide. But if you can, that's how you can identify your application in DSN profile table. The other table, DSN profile attributes, is a table which contains what you really want to do. So you can now have this keyword special register or global variable. In the column keyword, attribute 1 contains the set statement. And what has changed is attribute 2, because now you can specify whether this applies to remote application. So if it stays null, it applies only to remote applications. Or you can specify 1, which then means I want to have this applied only to local applications. Or you can specify number 2, which means for both remote and local. Example here. So let's say I have a local application with auth ID auth01, and I want to set current log timeout to 15 and set that log resolution priority to 5. So I have these 3 insert statements. The first one goes to the profile table where I define the or identify my application. So this is simple. It will just be auth01. And the second and the third insert go to profile attributes, the profile table, which contains what I want to happen. So the first row here will update a special register, and I have this set current log timeout equal to 15 as attribute 1. And if you recall, attribute 2 now is equals to 1, which means I want to apply this only to local applications. And the second row is setting the global variable. So I have this this command to set the global variable to 5. Okay, so super simple example. You need to consider some things here. In order to use it even for local applications, I believe you need this DDF address space up and running, even for local applications. I believe I got this error when I tried without. Keep in mind that you need to have function level that supports this. So 501 or higher if you want this deadlock resolution priority. And there are some rules how the profile, when the profile is scanned and how it applies. Also, and now I don't remember from the top of my head, I had some issues when I was using the profile tables, but also the application itself was modifying the special register or the global variable. So you need to be careful if you have this. I would recommend just do it either on the profile table side or in the application, not both, because then it might be unpredictable. And that's about the profile tables. I think it's really cool that you can now do these modifications without modifying the application. So I think that might be helpful to some of your applications if you need these features. So now I have like 20 minutes. SQL data insight, that's a huge topic, right? And I don't want to go into the details too much. I'm pretty sure you are aware of this functionality. There are great sessions. I have seen a session by Thomas Baumann, which I really liked with his examples and so on. So that was really cool. So in my case here, I will just be very, very brief. What I want to point out is the architecture of the SQL DI, and also remind you that there is a new user guide in a DB2 documentation. Because what I do, I have a script that downloads me all the PDFs in regular periods of time. So I added this user guide to my script as well because it was not there originally, right? So it's a new user guide. So make sure you take a look at it if you are interested in this feature. So the other thing is that there are some changes on the ZOS level. So there is this IBM Z Deep Neural Network library. You can see it on the right bottom. And it's integrated with IBM Z, especially with the Z16 processor, right? So that you can use the special instructions there and that accelerator that's available there. From the software side, what's interesting here is that is running on top of the Spark cluster. Maybe you remember a few years ago there was a hype about Spark running on ZOS and so on. So this is still here. So Spark is still running there and using this ZDeep neural network library stack. So this is like a high picture, which also means that in order to have this running, it requires some configuration. Okay. In our case, it was taking some time. Really, I can tell you that in our case, it took some time before we had this up and running. But yeah, at the end, it's working fine, at least for us. From my perspective, because I have some machine learning background, I was interested what's behind. So I spoke with one of the authors at IDAC, and then I was reading this research paper. So if you are really geeky and you are into these details, then take a look at this paper. I have a link there. And maybe you are familiarized with the Word2Vec framework, which is this based on, but it's worked a bit differently because Db2 now tokenizes the different relational data so that it can use this framework. So that's really what's behind if you want to read that. But what is here from the SQL perspective? Basically, there are these four user-defined functions. But in order to have them running, you need to do some configuration, as I mentioned. So, and then you need to, if you have this all set up, or this architecture as I showed, if it's all running, then you need to specify which tables are enabled for this AI. So, and once you have it, then you can run these queries, and it allows you really cool things. And you don't have to develop them on your own. It's now available with DB2 So you can run these semantic queries and these fuzzy queries like show me all the employees that are similar to Emil, or I don't know if these analogies are interesting. For example, let's say that I say that Emil is a typical citizen of Prague who is a typical citizen of London, and it will show you someone, right? So that might be really interesting. So I would say it can complement your existing business applications, because in many cases companies already have some AI in play, like anomalies detections. I guess you already have something like that, but maybe this can complement your existing applications or help it with some new applications. So again, I don't have like experience with huge queries on these. I just played with the basic stuff, so it's working fine. For huge data, it might be more challenging. I don't know what's the performance. I know there were some performance improvements already in this space, so maybe you can share your experience if you have some. This is the example of UI. So there is UI where you specify which table is enabled for this AI, and then there are also some sample data you can use for playing with that. So here I have some selects from this sample data, so you can see how I use this AI similarity and the semantic cluster functions and so on. So that's how you can learn and play with that. I already mentioned the installation process, so it takes some time. You need to configure that. Then you need to enable for AI queries. I think it supports just single tables and views, as far as I know. Maybe there was some recent enhancement I'm not aware of. Then you need to count with the extra resources based on the Spark cluster. And at the bottom, I list some performance improvements I'm aware of. There was this APAR, and also in 504 they have some prefetching enhancements. So again, there are some good sessions around. So if you are interested, make sure you visit them or see them.
Emil,
Uh-huh.
we've got one comment on SQL Data Insights, which is from Luis Paulo, who's saying prerequisites for SQL Data Insights are not so clear.
Prerequisites are not so clear. And honestly, I didn't do the installation. I just opened the ticket for our procs, right? And I know they were like doing the job. Again, so it requires the Spark cluster, so it has its own requirements, current Java, whatever. Then I know the zparms, they were worried about some caching, so they also on the DB2 side there were some changes. So it was in our case it was non-trivial effort, because also our environment, dev environment, was rather small, so that was kind of limiting as well. And I'm not sure if the documentation is clear on all the details? I would say it is, but I really didn't go through the exercise of installing. So I'm sorry, I cannot provide more about the installation. But definitely, it was not a not trivial or super simple thing.
Yeah, and I think also it certainly is something you can do in 12, but probably much easier in 13. And also, I don't think you absolutely necessarily need Z16 with the AI chip on, but
No, I think you don't need. It can be software emulated, I believe, but you would exploit the full power if you have Z16, right?
yeah.
Yeah, because you have this acceleration there. So that's really where, especially for the training. So the training can be time consuming. The evaluation, I think, then it's faster because it's then already when you run these UDFs, but the training can be big depending on the volume of data. And that's where I think they have this prefetch optimization because the training process needs to read all the data and do the calculations, which can be time consuming. Also, one of the things we discussed 2 years ago was if there is like a chance to do those incremental learnings because your data evolve, right? And you train it at some set. And I don't know if there was an enhancement in this space because now you need to again maybe retrain at some point if your data change a lot during the time. If you have static data, that's fine. But if your data change a lot, maybe you need to retrain time to time and so on. So yeah. Anything else on this topic?
Uh, yeah, just a further comment that Dion's just mentioning that because in V12 it's just implemented via UDFs, so therefore it does make it easier with 13 because it's native in 13. So I think that's why it's from a lot of people's point of view best to wait for 13 before trying it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll jump into this next section. And again, this is based on what I have learned from IBM PFSs and also from the Red Book. So if you want to learn more, go to Red Book because it contains even more. I just selected the features that I think are relevant to application developers. And some of them I really was not aware that it was working that way. For example, this one. So again, if you are a ListX user and you were using the substring there, Db2 always allocated a buffer of 4K. Now it will just allocate the buffer of the bytes as needed. So I mean, yeah, nice enhancement. If you are a heavy user of ListX, you will appreciate it, right? I have a super simple example here. Why I would do that, I don't know, but maybe you have some example better than what I have here. The beauty of it that this is available in 100 and no rebind needed. It's really just at runtime. So this is good. FTBs. I remember FTBs in V12, and this is a screenshot I took from an IDAC blog I was posting back there, written by IBM. So it was cool, but then I learned that many people were complaining about FTBs, but I think it's really getting better and better. I have recently talked to one customer who starts exploring them again, and they are more happy. So I think they are getting better, and there were some nice enhancements in V12 and now they are pretty good in V13, I believe. So in 508 especially, they introduced the support for non-unique indexes because originally FTBs were available. So fast traverse blocks, I hope you understand what I'm talking about. So they were originally for unique indexes. In 508, IBM added support for non-unique indexes. And this is now changed in V13 because now the zparm is changed to yes. So non-unique indexes are supported by default as well because in V12 there was this zparm and the default value was null, that it was not allowed for non-unique indexes. So that's there. They also raised the limit of the key, which is good. So now you can have larger keys for FTBs and so on. So this is really good. Couple of sort enhancements. This new sortL instruction in Z15, if you open the principles of operations, you can learn more about this instruction. So Db2 will exploit that. there are some restrictions when and how it will use it. So they are documented in that red book. Some interesting sort enhancements. So I was not aware of these enhancements. Again, this is what I have learned from the red book because I didn't experience any issues before. So they have these 3 examples when there are some enhancements in the sort for these types of queries. So if you are using these, maybe you will enjoy this new feature. Again, it's available since function level 100, no rebind needed. Super cool. Another thing I was not aware of, so if you had this order by with a long varchar column as the last column in the key, and Db2 was allocating the maximum size, and now it will actually keep the data length as needed. So reduces the sort storage available in 100 and no rebind needed. Again, targets very specific queries, but might be very, very useful. If you have insert-heavy applications, this might be interest of you. They have some new retry logic for PPGs if you are inserting many rows into PPGs, and it's nicely described in the thread book. Again, I just stole the picture. As you can see, it's from chapter 7. So take a look if you really see these -904 SQL codes in your applications that are doing inserts. So that might be helpful. Index looker site enhancements. Now they apply even to inserts, updates, and deletes. Before DB213, they were never for update, I believe. So now it's available. So this can be cool for some applications and SQL. So that was a very quick walkthrough through the performance enhancements that might be interest of application developers. Some of them look really very, very narrow or for specific use case, but still might be helpful. And in those last few minutes, I have some notable APARs which I found interesting, and I think many of them are also retrofitted to V12. But I watch what's new in DB213 mainly, so that's what I have. What I have here. So one of them I found interesting, and it was pretty quiet since then, is list prefetch for merge statement. And the reason I noticed this one was that I like merge because I'm kind of lazy developer. So instead of doing insert and update, I rather do merge. But when I start like talking about that, some customers or some users told me, well, yeah, merge is nice, but it really doesn't support index if you update an index in the merge statement. And I was not aware of it. And then I looked into the documentation and it was there. So and this APAR actually introduced this list prefetch format merge, which allows the index access now can be used even in merge. So I have these screenshots from the documentation where now what I have underscored that now you can even have host variable parameter marker non-column expression in the merge key column, versus in the past it was only constant where index could have been used. So now this expanded bit, or maybe made merge more helpful, useful for some applications. So you can see on the top right, if you do explain, you can see the prefetch, and even for query block merge. So I found this useful. I think I can skip this one. Product identifiers may be useful for remote applications. This was also interesting. Improved plan table parent plan number. In the past, when I was doing explains, sometimes there were some query blocks that didn't have a parent, so it really pointed to the root, and it was confusing to explain to someone. Now they have changed that and fixed this, I would say, and now the parent plan number is written to the children block. So now you can really connect them. It would be nice to have a visual, but because I don't have yet my my visual explain working, so I don't have a picture here. So I'm sorry, but maybe if you did explains, if you like visual explains, maybe take a look at this, because that's where I found it useful. That now finally the parent and children will be properly linked. I can skip this one. It just completes the backflow support. I can skip this one. This one I have it here because this was super confusing to me. I don't know if you are a user of current data bind option, which is one of the most confusing option I know. So now in this case, even if you have current data, yes, you can you can have DB2 use some lock avoidance techniques, but I would be very careful with this. It's really targets some specific use case, I would say, where you want to use this. That's why there is this zparm, which controls whether you want this on or off. So I wouldn't turn this on, because then you can see some incompatible behavior, some false errors, and so on. So only use that with care if you have excessive lock contentions. But I really like to read about this current data, because yeah, it confused me a bit. Changes in the explain tables, and so that now they contain this plan ID and hash ID across all the tables to uniquely identify the rows, which is good. On the other hand, it required to recreate your tables. So I know some customers, vendors had some pain with doing that, but I think it's good now that you can really correlate the rows in different tables using these columns. So which is good. I can skip that. I can skip that. And I think that's all I wanted to say. So here are those references I wanted to show you. So make sure you read these red books. I enjoy them, and they are pretty short. So it's not a long read. So just one vacation, and you have them covered. So that's what I did. So they are cool. And apparently, what's new? I keep monitoring what's new because it contains not just new function levels, but also those APARs. And they are coming. So there are many APARs coming outside of function levels. So I keep them monitoring, and sometimes they are really nice enhancements. So watch that space as well. So it's all in this what's new. Apparently, it's better if you go to website rather than to the PDF, because then you have the live information. So with that, I want to thank you. I hope you are still with me. You enjoyed. This is our kids when I told DB2. So they usually fall asleep immediately. So thank you. I don't know if there are any questions. I would be happy for any feedback you might have. And I hope you enjoyed and you learned something. Thank you. And now maybe I can open the camera so that you see I'm still with you.
Thanks very much, Emil. That was brilliant. I've opened up so that people can unmute if they've got any questions, or they can still put a question in the chat. I don't think there's any other questions so far. Luis Paolo has said many thanks.
Thank you.
As I always say, and as Dylan's just done, a round of applause here. You don't get that in the virtual conference, I'm afraid, but I think there's some good comments coming up.
Yeah, thank you for the comments, because that really helps, because when you do this virtual, I just talk to my camera.
Mercy is saying she hasn't fallen asleep. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Kurti is saying great session. Thank you very much, Emil. A lot of takeaways, and I agree with that. There are a lot of takeaways. I've made some good notes myself. So great
Yeah,
session.
slides available, so I think you can download them already and use them. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so there's no questions at the moment.
And if you have time, as I mentioned, and I have this appendix section, right? And that's where I collect all the things I like. So you can go back to DB2 and anyway. So if you have if you want to learn more about what happened in the past, go there and see. All right.
Great. Right. Thanks very much. Please do fill in the feedback for this session, which is 6H, and the next DB2 session is not now until 3 o'clock this afternoon. So it's now into lunch break, and then there's lunch and learn sessions at 12, and various other sessions at 1:30. So enjoy those if you can. And the DB2 stream recommences at 3 o'clock. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good lunch. And
Bye.
thanks, Emil. Great session.
Thank you. Enjoy the conference. Thank you. Bye.